You're listening to the Beer History Podcast, hosted by David Totaro and Dennis Abdelhamid. And now, here are the hosts of the Beer History Podcast, David Totaro and Dennis Abdelhamid.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Beer History Podcast. Today, we'll be talking about the history of beer in the Pacific Northwest. My name is David, the Master Totaro, and with me, as always, is Dennis, the Disaster Abdelhamid, which makes me the Master of Disaster. Cue laughter. Clint. Thank you. I came up with that 2 minutes ago. Anyway, Clint Tremper is our guest today. He flew in all the way from Seattle, Washington. I'm going to pretend just for this podcast.
Exactly right.
He is a beer connoisseur, as I am. We both started getting into craft beer quite some time ago. He's been living on the opposite side of the U.S. from me, though, so his beer experience has been completely different from mine. Clint, great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm very happy.
Looking forward to talking about some beer.
Yes, that's right. I'm pretty excited about this, actually. So, I've experienced beer all over the U.S. because I travel quite a bit. But one of the places I've actually traveled probably the least has been the Pacific Northwest. In fact, the only time I've been in the Pacific Northwest has been
for
your
my wedding.
What year was that?
I should know this. 2009. It was in 2009.
2009. So that was a long time
Yeah.
ago. And I mean, at that time, beer was still kind of a newer thing, I'd say, for both of us, like craft beer.
Yeah.
We've been drinking it for a little bit, but it wasn't like, I don't know. I wasn't huge into it yet.
I don't feel like when I lived here, I don't think it was available, really.
No, not
I mean,
really.
you'd have to go looking for it, and it'd be stuff from other areas.
It's true.
And then I moved to this place where there's just breweries everywhere.
It must have been
It was
a
part of the
crazy
culture.
difference.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember when we started finally getting breweries opening up in Brevard County, like multiple breweries. It was people would say, "Oh, right now," because it blew up pretty quickly. Right now, people would say, "Right now is kind of like how the Pacific Northwest was in the 80s and the early 90s."
Yeah.
So, which I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." I guess analogy, but you basically moved into this world where it was like
Right.
an established, rooted culture that had been there for decades, and here it was like nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat.
It's just the variety that I didn't know existed.
Yeah. So
Kind of blew my mind.
yeah. So my first question is specifically about the term Pacific Northwest, because I've always, in my brain, I've always been like, oh, Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, and some other stuff. But I never really knew. And when I did my research, it seemed like there was like people debate about what is. There's no official term, I guess. But what do you say it is?
I think Washington and Oregon firmly in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Parts of Idaho.
And
arguably Northern California. And even the southern part of British Columbia, Canada.
I read that quite a bit, actually.
So
British Columbia.
culturally, I think that there's a lot in common between a lot of the areas there, but like any place, like even just Washington, which is where I've spent most of my time living there, Eastern Washington and Western Washington are pretty different politically and culturally.
What about beer wise? Will you find different beer like in Western?
No, I don't think so.
Eastern?
No, beer wise, I guess it's pretty good. Like some of the beers I really like come from breweries on the other side of the mountains in Washington.
Oh yeah.
So we're in Western Washington, near Seattle. I don't live quite in Seattle, just north of Seattle, and there's some great breweries from over the mountains in Eastern Washington that we go out of our way to find.
Really? Is it since you have to literally cross a mountain range, is it kind of a big deal going across the other side of the
we
state?
can buy them at our local store, so it's not like, but we're looking for them.
Yeah.
They're good stuff.
I get you. That makes sense. Yeah, I did read Idaho was a big one, and one thing that I learned in my research was that Idaho is a massive producer of hops as well, which
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
In fact, what I read was I actually read a whole. It's like the what was it called? The U.S. I think it's literally just called U.S. Hops is the name of this group. I think that's what they're called. But they do an annual report where they put out these numbers for hops grown in the U.S. And number 2 is under Washington is Idaho, and
Makes
Oregon.
sense.
I think Oregon was number 3.
So that's in the east of the Cascade Mountains.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me that like the capital is Yakima.
Yep.
And Idaho's not really that far away from Yakima.
Yeah.
So climate wise, it makes sense that
similar.
There'd be similar. You'd get similar crops.
Yeah. So we'll talk about hops in a little while. I got like a bunch of I don't know how many people are going to find it interesting. I guess if you're listening to this podcast, most people will, but I thought it was super interesting reading about. But I kind of want to get into the history of beer in the Pacific Northwest. But first, we should probably pour our first beer.
And I feel like this beer is a historical artifact anyway. So
yes.
It's perfect.
So normally, I'm the one that provides the beer related to the episode. This is the first time that we have beer brought by the guest, which is fantastic because this is beer that you cannot get here in Florida. And this first one especially, even though I don't know if you probably wouldn't call it a craft beer, but it's
made by Pabst.
It is like you said, a historic beer that is renowned in the Washington area, I guess, right? Or specifically Seattle.
Yeah, Washington, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so let's
we can talk about it a little bit.
Okay,
sounds good.
Okay, so the beer we're talking about here is Rainier. Clint, would you like to tell us a little bit about Rainier?
Well, Rainier is a beer that goes back a long ways in Washington. I believe they started brewing it in the 1800s. And there were kind of two primary two primary breweries. There was Rainier and there was Olympia.
Yeah, Olympia.
And both of them you can still buy them today. But neither of them are their own entity anymore. Rainier is owned by Pabst. So Rainier is interesting. They had a brewery in downtown Seattle. Well, not downtown, in the industrial district there. And to this day, that brewery building stands. And right now, I think it's got some shops and whatnot in it.
But they don't brew anymore.
They don't brew anymore, but they've still got the big Rainier sign on it. You can see it it's right by the freeway.
That's pretty cool.
I-5 goes right past it.
So do they even brew Rainier in Washington anymore?
No, I don't think so. I think they brew Rainier wherever they brew Pabst.
That's pretty interesting. All right, here. That one is for you, Dennis. Clint, that is for you. All right. What?
It's too much.
Dennis, there's the 2:16.
It's 11:30 in the morning.
Come on, Dennis. Drink up, poor Dennis. He's a lightweight. It's adorable. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
First beer. All right, drink the whole thing right now, Dennis. Go. Nice, light, simple lager. Nothing to write home about, but
no.
Nice piece of history, though.
This is people still buy it today. It's still available in the Northwest, and it's not a bad choice. It's often sold at concerts and stuff, and it's not a bad way to go. Is
it popular enough that you see it in pubs and stuff a lot?
Yeah, it's often the only macro.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Pabst bought it out, I'm assuming, at some point. So they were independent for... I remember reading a little bit of it. I didn't write any notes. I feel like the 60s or something like that.
I think they made it longer than that.
Oh, really?
But I'm not sure. I did a little research as well, but my computer died and I can't look at my notes.
Oh, no. Are you serious?
I thought I charged it this morning. I'm irresponsible. Anyway, I think they made it further, maybe into the 90s.
Ooh. Well, I'll, I put little... when we do the editing, I'll figure it out and we'll put it in there. Yeah. Rainier. And then, I know brewing goes back pretty far. Obviously the United States formed from east to west. So you're going to have all the early breweries are going to be from the East Coast. I think New Amsterdam was one of the first breweries, and, that was in the 1500s maybe, or the 1600s, long time ago. But I guess from what I read, the earliest brewing in the Pacific Northwest was German immigrants. Yeah. There were two in particular. One guy was named Henry Saxer. He's kind of the first one. And this was in the 1850s. So he, from what I understand, he came in from the East and moved out west on purpose because he wanted to have like I guess the density of the population and stuff in the east. For some reason, he wanted to move out into a more remote area, and hops, was kind of just growing out there.
Right.
And it was sort of like this, serendipitous thing where they were able to just start, brewing. But he started Liberty Brewing in 1852. That was in Portland. So
Okay.
Oregon kind of got, the earliest brewers. And then there was a guy, I didn't write it down, who kind of took over as the main brewery in the area shortly after him, another German immigrant. And he kind of did the same thing where he started in like New York, and then he moved to Pennsylvania or something like that. And he just moved across the U.S. and ended up in the Northwest. And then these two breweries were competitors, and eventually they kind of blew up. And beer was just I guess that was early brew culture. Obviously, there was no craft beer at the time, but it was German beer. And then, fast forward to the 80s, and that's when, you start having some interesting stuff happening.
Right. That's when the craft beer started.
That is when the craft beer started. And there was a guy named Burt Grant. Do you know about Grant's Pub?
Yeah, out in that was in Yakima, yeah?
I think so, yeah. Yep. And
which is not near like Seattle. It's across the mountains. It's out in a more rural part of the state.
Yeah.
And it's basically in the desert.
Really?
But
it's desert.
It's a good climate for a bunch of stuff. So they grow out there. They grow hops, obviously.
Sure.
And then there's a bunch of areas that are really great for wine grapes.
Oh, really?
Washington wine.
Washington wine. I also read that apples are a big thing.
Yeah.
Of course, Washington apples. Everybody knows.
Washington apples are huge.
Yeah, and this Grant's Pub, I guess. Are you familiar with Michael Jackson, the beer journalist, not the singer,
not the famous entertainer,
not the famous entertainer?
Yes, I am.
I guess he came to the Pacific Northwest shortly after Grant's Pub started brewing in a specific type of IPA, right? Early IPA.
Okay.
And early American IPA. And he actually said, and this is something we were talking about before we started recording, he said that it was the original Pacific Northwestern IPA, or maybe you just called it Northwestern IPA. And I remember when I read it during research, I was like, is that different than a West Coast IPA? I'm like, is that just, he just called it that? But then you mentioned, like I was saying, I almost didn't even put it in my notes, but then you mentioned that's actually something you've heard people say. Yeah.
I'm not sure my palate is sharp enough to know, but I do. I did a little research myself and found the same thing. I think that they're like brothers. They're like
very close in age.
Very close, yeah. But I think the Northwest IPA maybe is a riff on the West Coast IPA. That's how I interpret it.
And you said maybe has a little bit more of a malty backbone.
Yeah, so I mean that's what the West Coast IPA is, right? They kind of eased up on all the maltiness and really give you that bracing hard hops hit. And I think you still get that hopsiness with the Northwest IPAs, and we'll taste it when we get to the next beer.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited for because it's a really good one.
Good. Okay, I'm excited too.
There's a little maltiness left in there. They're really trying to do that.
Yeah.
And I like the complexity of it because as much as I love the hops flavor, the hops arms race in craft beer has been in full effect for a long time, right?
It has been, absolutely,
I mean?
yeah. Not to go too far off on a tangent, but I mean, the style IPAs is, to me, what makes it unique besides its profile. I mean, you've got crazier beers than that. Like, American barley wines are just intense, just as an example. But what makes it so unique is the variety of sub-styles is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many types of IPAs, and some of them I think fall under the IPA umbrella, and some of them I feel like are different enough where they're really not the same as a traditional American IPA. But like, I've always been a huge fan of black IPAs. I love black IPAs or rye IPAs. Sierra Nevada used to have an awesome rye IPA that you never see anymore. But New England IPAs to me are one of those that I think is different enough where that's not the same beer as an IPA. It's a different style. And I think BJCP, it actually is categorized its own thing.
Yeah.
But so I'm curious how common New England IPAs are in Washington.
Not as common as what we normally see in the Northwest. Interesting enough, there's a brewery not far from us called Foggy Noggin, which I think is a great name for a brewery. That's their focus is
the hazy
kind of New England stuff,
really,
and British styles.
And they do pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, they're popular.
So New England and Old England,
kind of both.
All the Englands.
Yeah, they just group them all together.
That's interesting. So you guys didn't see a huge explosion though, like it didn't take over. Because here in even though we're in the Southeast here in Florida, it's for a while you saw, and I would say it's almost 50-50 now, probably still more New England.
New England IPAs?
You're more likely to, in fact, as you know, I'm not a huge fan of New England IPAs. I can drink them, but what I do not like is when the beer is not appropriately labeled as a New England IPA. It's just an IPA and you don't know. I always make the assumption that it's a traditional American IPA, and then I pour it, and I'm like, ugh. It actually happened at we went to Broken Barrel. You ever been at Broken Barrel?
Haven't.
No, they've been around. Actually, they probably started right after you moved or something. But they have a pretty good tap list, and they had a beer from Ellipsis, I think, and it was a double IPA or something like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, let's get that. And then Alexis got Bell's Two Hearted, which is fantastic beer. You guys get Bell's in? No? It's Michigan beer. They're so good.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Bell's Two Hearted is one of my favorite IPAs.
Yeah.
So dude brings them both out. Mine is like so cloudy. I was like, oh man, I'm not going to like this. This is going to suck. So I take the first sip and I was like, it was one of these things where I was like, and Alexis looks over and she goes, do you want to trade beers? And I'm like, yes, please. So we switched. She likes them. So, but yeah, anyway, that was a long tangent. Yeah. So, one thing that I thought was pretty neat, and I don't know if you knew this, but, the term craft beer, do you know about the origins of that term? Like
Not really.
When it was first used. So
for me, craft and microbrewery and stuff are all kind of intertwined, but I know they're not the same.
Yeah. So,
and I know once you make enough beer, you're no longer a micro.
Yes.
So
I have a lot of opinions about the subject, but I talked a little bit about it back when, I think in the I don't remember if it was in the Beer 101 episode or maybe it was the history of craft beer, but, about this guy, Vince Catone is his name. So back in like 86, he wrote a book called Good Beer Guide, Breweries and Pubs of the Pacific Northwest. And this is the first time
what year's that?
1986.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this was the first time where that anybody's been able to find at least where somebody used the actual term craft beer to describe the type of beer.
Oh, and it was for a book for the Pacific Northwest?
And it was specifically,
cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat.
I like that.
So,
and that's when things were in full swing. You had,
oh yeah. At least on your coast they were.
Yeah, on our coast, yeah. I forgot what. Oh, yeah, Red Hook.
Oh
was
yeah,
going by then.
Red Hook,
and
yeah,
then
they were
Pike Brewing.
Red Hook was 1981, and they're considered the first craft brewery in Seattle.
Yeah,
in Washington.
Yeah.
But yeah, they so the reason he used this term because up until that point, everybody was saying microbreweries or nano breweries.
Some of these were getting big.
They were, and his whole thing was like he kind of he's been asked about it, because it's kind of like his little claim for fame and or claim to fame. He says that he didn't like the term microbrewery because it really was more of just a description of the size.
Right.
So if you were making, Rainier, just as an example, and that was the only beer you made, and you were only making it locally, to him that was not the same as these other breweries that were experimenting and doing unique things.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so he was like, well, craft beer to me is a combination of size and quality and experimentation and all that stuff. And now the Brewers Association uses craft beer. They're kind of like the authority for here's the definition of craft beer. But what I personally where I take issue with the Brewers Association definition is they still, for craft beer, they still use size as a metric for whether or not you're a craft brewery. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think craft beer in and of itself is simply beer that has a certain level of quality and experimentation.
I feel like that's so subjective, though.
Sure,
like that at least size is an objective metric.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think size
quality
is, size I think is an appropriate metric for microbrewery versus macrobrewery. But for craft beer, I think you could be Budweiser and you can make craft beer. It's macro craft beer, and maybe it's not as good as, and maybe it is. Maybe Budweiser makes some IPA that is literally the best IPA
I feel like
they've ever
could.
had. They could.
I'm not sure they do.
Of course they could. They don't. And I can see why people don't like associating craft beer with a big brewery because it feels dirty. But to me, it's like, you got to take emotion out of it. It's like, is the beer high quality? Is it unique? Is it different? Is it, is the brewery trying to do something that's never been done before? Those are all qualities of craft beer to me.
Actually, this is a great, so I had this, aside kind of locked and loaded. Red Hook is a great example. So they started back in the early 80s and they got big. And as they grew, they started out in Seattle.
Yeah.
Eventually, they moved to Woodinville, Washington, which is a suburb outside of Seattle.
Yeah.
And they built this monster brewery, and then they built another one.
That was the one that we visited when I went to your wedding.
And they built another one in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yes.
So anything on either side of the Mississippi was brewed by their respective brewery.
Yeah.
On that side, but as part of this, they joined the Craft Beer Alliance.
Yeah. Yep.
Which
Widmer, it was Widmer, Red Hook, and Kona.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch has a 33% stake.
No, I think they're 100 now. I think they fully bought them out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say, but that back then they had a stake
for a long time.
Primarily, that was a deal to try and get distribution.
Yeah.
Yep. Budweiser has this huge distribution apparatus.
Network. Yeah.
That these craft brewers don't have. So I think in doing all of this, they lost cred.
Oh, I think so too. Absolutely agree with you.
Although somehow their beer is still good.
Somehow Kona didn't, though.
Yeah, so they kind of killed some cred by doing these deals, even though...
deal with the devil.
Yeah, it's kind of a deal with the devil. And over time, I stopped... We didn't go to the Red Hook Brewery anymore. There was tons of other breweries we could go to.
You didn't need to go to.
And we didn't, even though they continued to experiment. And since they've shut down that brewery and they've actually reduced their operations, I don't know if they're making as much beer as they used to bake.
They shut down the big one in Washington?
In Woodinville.
Really?
And
because I heard the one in New Hampshire closed. Well,
they opened a new brewery again in Seattle itself, I think in Ballard.
Huh.
A neighborhood in Seattle, and they also opened a place called the Brew Lab on Capitol Hill, which is a cool area of the city. So Shannon and I went out to. Funny enough, we were going to a tiki bar.
You and your tiki bars.
Yeah, I love tiki bars.
Are fun.
But we had time before our reservation, and we see this place called Brew Lab, and we walk in, and I got one of the best beers of my life. It was this. Stout, like a peanut butter stout thing.
Huh.
And it was unbelievably good.
So one of the best beers you ever had in your life was an Anheuser-Busch beer then?
Yeah. So...
Well, it kind of,
that's what I'm throwing out there.
It kind of goes with what I'm saying, right? It's like, the guy who brewed that beer is not Augustus Bush or something, He's probably some guy that's awesome who loves craft beer, who wants experience. He got the job and he's making awesome beer.
So we probably wouldn't have gone in that place if Red Hook, it said Red Hook real big over it, but it said Brew Lab.
Yeah.
So, and they had all kinds of good stuff, and that's where they do a bunch of experimentation. do we give them slack? I mean, I don't know about like.
Well, the thing that I've
It's kind of
noticed
weird.
is
Am I for not wanting to drink Red Hook? Am I a snob? Maybe I am.
I think so. I
It's
think
kind of this weird thing that I'm trying to navigate as a person.
You remember back in the '90s when me and Clint were big into punk rock and ska back in the late '90s and early 2000s. You can't like sellouts, right? And then literally, Real Big Fish comes out with the song. Their 1999, I don't know what year it was, song "Sellout," where they're literally basically they're just like, hey, we want to be rich and we're going to sell out, and we're literally making a song about it, and that's the song that we're going to sell out with. It was, and who didn't like that song? It was an awesome song, and the band was awesome, and to me, I actually feel like I kind of learned a lesson from that, because I was sort of in the I don't like sellouts mindset, because punk rock was all about like being yourself and all this stuff.
And there was a whole DIY aesthetic to it, and
sure,
especially if you were in like the DIY scene, like the Minor Threats of the world, and all that stuff, Fugazi.
Well, there's certain circumstances where, as a band, when you sell out, where you lose a lot of control over your content, because they want I'm paying for you, so you gotta give me what's gonna make me money.
Give me the hit single,
and that's gonna happen with some breweries too. But But I think that's not always the case. I think a lot of the times, whether it be music or beer, they're like, we think that you are doing the right formula that makes money, and we're buying you, and we want you to just do what you're doing. And like Founders, I think is a great. Do you guys get Founders?
Yeah.
Founders is amazing. I love Founders. It's one of me and Alexis's favorites, and their beer didn't change when they became commercial.
So you guys get Elysian here?
We do.
Elysian's really good.
Yeah. Space Dust is pretty popular over here.
Elysian's great, and it's InBev Anheuser.
Are they the ones that do Pernicious too? No, that's Wicked Weed. Wicked Weed's in North Carolina. Yeah. It's funny. You guys get completely different beers than we do.
So, yeah. We
don't get the only brewery we get from your region of the U.S. that I can think of is
Elysian.
Rogue. Isn't Rogue?
And Rogue is
and Elysian, yeah. Because we don't even get the shoots, which sucks.
Which is crazy, because that's a big brewery.
They're huge. They're popular, but they probably realize that they aren't going to make as much money.
Maybe they.
I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing that I
think they're independent still.
Yeah.
Even though they're big, they're a big operation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got a lot of these big. Sam Adams literally bought Dogfish Head, and they're still independent.
I can't believe that.
That's huge. Wild. But which just full circle ties back to this whole definition of craft beer, right? If you look into the Brewers Association's definition, they've increased the volume specifically because Sam Adams was one of their like founding members, and they've always been a great standing member. And they're like, well, they're too big. We have to cut them out. And they're like, well, we don't want to cut them out because we have a great relationship with them. They're awesome. They're independent. They haven't sold out. So they push that ceiling, which to me means the ceiling is stupid. Why do we even have it? Like, get rid of it. Their beer is craft beer. They make new stuff all the time. Their holiday pack is different every year because they're changing it out. And
was it? No, that was Dogfish Head.
What?
That was when we went to the Great American Beer Festival, Lobster Stout.
Oh yeah, Choc Lobster. It was called, which is such a great name.
Choc Lobster.
Choc Lobster. That was a good beer. I
loved it.
They eventually,
it was so weird.
They bottled it for a little bit.
So strange.
It was very weird. It was good.
Loved it though.
You got that sweet lobster flavor, which somehow really went
a little fishy.
Yeah. I think Dogfish Head they do a really good.
They're cool.
They're one of the best experimenters.
Brewery.
Yeah. Do you remember? I know we're going off on so many tangents here. We should pour the next beer real quick.
Okay. Do we want to roll into it somehow, or I don't know.
Which one should we do next?
Well, the Bodhizafa is the winner.
Okay. Yeah. Let's start with.
I think Fremont is kind of a more new school.
Okay.
But it's still an IPA.
No, let's go with how do you say Bodhizafa?
Bodhizafa.
Bodhizafa IPA, and this is Georgetown Brewing, which is they're pretty big in
yeah, pretty big.
Washington.
Very, very much a hometown favorite.
All right.
Oh, do I?
Yeah. If you would like to drink some of this beer, you're gonna have to.
I want some. Of the three I brought, that's my favorite.
Dennis, you skipping this one?
Yeah. Good, I'll get to take some home. Oh, maybe not.
No, you do not. Head. So you really like this beer? It's a good one.
Yeah.
Quick. Oh, look at that! Did it spill? It didn't spill. That is a good a good pour. Good pour, bad speech.
It's a beaut.
Look at
that.
Man.
Gorgeous.
Oh, wow.
It's gorgeous.
Whew. I thought that was a fail, but it was not. We'll do one of these again. Proust. Side question. What's your favorite Cheers word?
Probably Prost.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good one.
What about you?
I don't know. I jump around. I think it depends on my mood. I think that usually ends up being my go-to. But I maybe honestly, it's probably L'chaim. That one's really fun. L'chaim. Hello, L'chaim.
We should try a few of these.
Okay, all right. Here we go. You ready? All right. L'chaim. That's good.
Opa one?
That feels
Opa,
good.
I know
yeah, Opa. That's Opa. Now we're Greek. No, that's not even remotely similar. Opa We're gonna get bad comments now. Now, okay, so this kind of has it doesn't taste like a hazy IPA to me, but it has some little bit of a quality of a New England IPA to me.
I think that's what we were talking about. So the
Pacific Northwest.
I think this is a Pacific Northwest
really
IPA.
That's interesting. Now this I actually really like a lot. To me, and there are some New Englands that I do enjoy. I don't not like any New England IPAs, but sometimes they just it's so much,
Yeah.
This, it's like it gives a little bit I think that's what you were saying too,
so
right?
You've got your West Coast IPA where they're really trying to get that hop forward taste, right? They're going for the huge citrus.
Yeah.
They're kind of pulling back on the malty tastes, the caramel and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think this similarly puts that citrus hoppy flavors forward.
Yeah.
And definitely. Aromas, but I don't think they pull back on the caramel as much.
Yeah,
I think they do still, but I think it's a little less. You leave a little? I think you get a little more balanced. So I think while these guys participated in the hops arms race, I'll say that again, while the hoppiness kind of went up in all of these beers, I think the maltiness offsets it a little bit, and you get a more balanced beer. So I love a West Coast IPA, but I like this too.
So I think where the West Coast IPA has a lack of balance in a direction that I enjoy, I think the New England has a lack of balance in a direction I don't. But this is kind of like
some right in the middle,
sort of like giving you both where they work with each other. Yeah,
I like this beer a lot.
Are they our Northwest beers typically have a haze to them like this?
I think a lot
IPAs?
of them do.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like I don't get crystal clear IPAs when I order IPAs most of the time.
So that kind of makes me think that this whole New England IPA thing is sort of like them just amping up something that already existed, not making something new. Because this, to me, this almost feels like a baseline, and they just kind of went off the rails with this. That's what it feels like to me. I really don't like them. This is good. I really enjoy it.
I'm glad you like this.
Yeah. So one thing that I meant to mention earlier, just because I think it's funny, but I didn't, because we kind of went off on one of our tangents.
Yeah.
The term craft beer being used as a replacement for micro brewery or micro beer. Michael Jackson actually tried. I don't know if he tried coining a term, but he used a term that never caught on. That I think is really funny. Boutique.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Have you ever heard that before?
No.
Neither have I. A boutique beer.
I mean, yeah, totally. It's kind of a synonym, right?
A little dainty, but, a boutique beer. Like, I imagine a little ribbon,
I imagine you have
baby
to
powder blue
go
ribbon
into
around
a
the
cute
bottom.
little boutique to buy
boutique. It. So boutique is a kind of a funny term, obviously. But what I think is kind of neat, though, is this was 1986 when this guy comes up with this term craft beer. And just think about the culture we have right now and how many breweries there are. And, craft beer is just so well established and we all kind of understand what it means, at least on some level. In 1986, there was 124 breweries total. 126 in the entire United States.
That's not a lot.
Yeah, so that means this...
You said 124 and then you said 126.
124
Did two just magically appear somewhere?
Well,
Probably in that year.
sometime during that year, there were two new breweries, one of which was Grant's Pub.
When one brewery loves another brewery.
Very much.
There were 124 breweries in the U.S. in 1986. And then, we don't have the 2022 data yet. I think they're releasing it in the next month or so, but 9,247 breweries in 2021.
Totally believe that.
It's
crazy.
Insane. In fact, when we did our history of craft beer in the U.S. episode, which was, I don't know, a year-ish ago, however long that was, maybe it was a year and a half ago now, it was like 7,000 something, I'm pretty sure. I mean, it's just from our first episode till now, it's gone up like thousands. It's crazy to me. I don't know. I thought that was kind of neat though. 124 breweries, and he came up with that term. Pretty cool. So I would like to move on to our next topic, which I'm excited about.
Sounds good.
Which is hops. Do it, Dennis. Do the hops thing. Thank you.
They smell real good.
So there's this really funny. They do smell really good. There's this really funny coincidence, I guess, with the history of hops in Washington State. That it would amuse me. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed this before. So first, let's just talk about Yakima Valley. That's how you say it, right?
Yakima.
Yakima Valley.
That's what everyone I know says.
Well, you know better than I would.
You know how it is. Like if you roll through that town, they'll probably correct you. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like we live in Melbourne, Florida, and people are like Melbourne, whatever.
Yeah.
Or Worcester is my favorite. Or
Worcester
in Massachusetts, it's spelled like Worcester, but
like
they say
Worcestershire sauce.
Yeah. Yakima Valley. Yakima Valley. We're gonna go with your pronunciation.
I think so. I think that's right. I hope.
The amount of hops that is produced in Washington State is staggering. I'm sure many people watching this or listening are aware that Washington State is a big producer of hops. It's in the hops belt. And, they produce a lot of hops. But it's like they produce most of the hops in the U.S. by a huge margin. And then in the world even, I mean, it's pretty insane. And most of it comes from Yakima Valley.
Yeah.
Right? What are there other regions in Washington that produce a lot of hops?
That's the only one I know of. So
That's
I'm
kind
not
of
sure.
the one.
Yeah, that's the one everybody knows.
So this is pretty neat. So what I learned was how that came to be. It wasn't just always growing.
I'd
there.
like to know this.
Yeah. This is pretty cool. I think it's pretty neat. So I think there were always some wild hops in the region, but it was not a significant amount. I mean, maybe more than some other areas because of the temperature and the environment. But back in the mid 1800s, around 1865. Are you familiar with the area Puyallup? Puyallup. That's how you say it? Puyallup. Okay.
Puyallup.
Okay. Puyallup. Now that's western. That's west of the mountain range, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that was actually the original hops region?
No.
Yes. So
no, I did not.
So this is pretty neat.
Puyallup. Huh?
In 1865, a man named Charles Wood, and his name is important for my weird coincidence later.
Okay.
Charles Wood. He literally was like, I just want to grow hops for my own beer that I want to brew.
Yeah.
Little tiny operation, right? He had his little farm. He had other crops, and he started growing hops. He found some wild hops. He bought it. I don't know how he did it. He started growing hops. Up until this point, hops were actually mostly grown in the eastern U.S. In fact, New York for like 100 years or something like that. I'm going to have to fact check that. Producer? They were the biggest hops producer in the U.S. So they produced most of the hops, and the Northeast was all hops. And in 1865, this guy, Charles Wood, started growing his little hops on his property. And I guess he must have brewed a lot of beer. I didn't see anything about whether he opened a little brewery or what. But he couldn't produce enough hops for himself to brew. So he got this guy who lived nearby named Ezra Meeker. He's like, here, I'm going to give you some cuttings. Can you grow some hops? I'll buy all of the hops that you produce, all of it. And the guy says, sure. So this guy was already a farmer, and him and his father were like, okay, we'll dedicate some land to growing some of this hops. So this guy Ezra, he starts growing this hops, and it was
crazy.
The environment in that exact area was perfect. It exploded. He for years he grew hops. At one point he had like 500 plus acres of hops farms, and he started selling cuttings to other people who started growing hops as well. So how do you say it again? A Puyallup?
Puyallup.
Like not even close. Puyallup exploded, and for a pretty good amount of time up until the late 1800s, they took over as the number one hops producer in the U.S. And there was actually some sort of
no idea.
I don't remember what it was that killed. I think it was insects that killed off hops in the eastern U.S. It almost completely killed it off, where they were sort of off the map. And Washington State took over. 1892. This thing called the hops louse decimated all of the hops in the entire region, completely destroyed the industry. Now, luckily, one might say serendipitously for the people living on the western side. The eastern side of the mountains.
Yeah.
There was a man.
They transplanted.
This is so funny to me. I don't know why this amuses me. The guy who brought the hops to western Washington was Charles Wood. The guy who brought hops to eastern Washington was Charles Carpenter. Yeah. Come on, is that not weird? Charles Wood and Charles Carpenter. They're both Charles Wood and Carpenter. How big a response
were you really looking for?
The more I think about this, the more it amuses me.
The fact that you think that's the most hilarious thing is what's making me laugh.
Charles Wood and Charles Carpenter. And this Charles Carpenter guy, he actually gets hops from his father. Had like a farm in New York, and he got clippings from his father, starts growing them in Yakima Valley, and same thing, explodes. Now the thing was there wasn't enough people producing hops. Like there wasn't enough farmers. There wasn't enough workers. So oddly enough, Alexander Graham Bell, the same man who pioneered the telephone, he invested a massive amount of money. I guess there's an area called Moxie that's part of Yakima Valley. It's like a third of the hops comes from it, something like that. He started investing all this money into. It was something like, "Hey, we'll give you, if you pay us $75, we'll give you 50 acres of land, but you have to produce hops." And all these people came from all over the U.S. and they started producing it, and that was a major part of it too. So you can thank Alexander Graham Bell for.
Oh, cool!
Yeah, Yakima Valley.
That's a cool story.
And then obviously to this day, they're still a huge producer, which kind of makes me wonder how pest control must have really played a huge part on this, right? Because you have two massive regions in the U.S. that got wiped out completely, and they're still going strong in eastern.
The hops fields over in the Yakima Valley are really cool. Because they're on these huge trellises.
Trellises. Yeah. With the strings.
Shannon and I got a nice weekend away where we went to a town called Prosser, Washington, which is a wine town. They make a bunch of wineries there, and they're making wine. But on the way there, we're driving. We decided to jump off the main roads. We're not on the U.S. roads.
Off the beaten path,
let's just get on these roads. So we're driving through farm country, and we're driving 2-lane road with 25-foot trellises on this side and 25-foot trellises on this side, and you're just driving along. There's hops.
Oh man, that sounds so.
This is super cool.
Did you have the windows down?
This is a neat area.
Smell it and stuff? Oh man, that sounds like so much fun.
It was hot though. It was like 100 degrees.
Was it really? Yeah. That's crazy. The one thing that sucks is, hops do not grow well in Florida. They can grow, and it's neat because the University of Florida, UF, has they kind of pioneered these special breeds that can grow better in Florida. You even once in a while you go visit a little local brewery and they'll have
their own.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sure it's like nothing like your area, but I've always wanted to drive through a hops farm. I never have. I've never been in one in person.
Come on over, man.
I will, man. I definitely want to now. Oh my God, Dennis, you finished the first beer? I'm going to give you a little bit of the next one. You okay? Yeah. Okay. You're okay after your part of a Rainier?
That was good.
You like that one?
Yeah, it's nice and simple.
Yeah.
Easy drinker.
The next one will blow your socks off.
So I want to move on to the next part. What I'm interested in is, we have, like we talked about at the very beginning, we have completely different beer cultures, I feel like, in Florida and Washington. I mean, at least they were back when you first moved over there.
I'm not sure they're that different anymore.
Maybe they're not. So give me kind of a, well, actually, let's pour the next beer, and then I want you to give me a rundown. Actually, while I'm pouring, you can begin. How about that?
Sounds good.
You want to introduce this beer first?
Sure. This is a Fremont, which is another. Fremont is a neighborhood in Seattle, and Fremont Brewery's been around for, I'm not exactly sure, like 10, 15 years, something like that. They're relatively new, and they make a bunch of great beers. I love their branding a lot of the times. This isn't one of the most exciting brandings, but
it's simple.
The best one is the Sky Kraken.
Sky Kraken?
And it's got a picture of a giant squid in the sky attacking a zeppelin.
Oh, why didn't you bring that? That sounds awesome.
Because so this beer won, I think, a 2022 Washington beer award for.
This beer has credentials.
Juicy IPA.
Juicy. I feel that's funny. So are Washington beers typically considered juicy IPAs, Washington IPAs?
I couldn't say.
Because I feel like juicy was a precursor back to the New England thing. It was like a precursor to
like
New
these
England.
labels are kind of tough to manage, in my opinion. So
Dennis, here's yours. Mr. Tremper.
Thank you, sir.
I do like, I actually really like, I'm big into branding. I think it's fun.
I think so too.
It's really one of the coolest things. It's like, it reminds me of when you buy a vinyl record. You get the music, but you also get artwork. There's like an art to it.
There's something to a physical copy of music. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I sent you a picture of Disco Wolf once. You remember that?
What was that?
Disco Wolf is a Fremont beer.
Oh, it was a Fremont beer? What did it look like?
It's like a wolf head wearing like a Saturday Night Fever style, like wide collar thing.
So why is this one? This is like one of their big beers. They should
it won an award.
It won an award. I remember. Did you ever get into They Might Be Giants at all?
Sure.
They had an album called Apollo 18, and you were talking about that Kraken.
Yeah.
What was it? Grabbing a
Zeppelin.
A Zeppelin. They have an album where Apollo 18, where it's like a Kraken attacking a whale, like a blue whale, and there's this little Apollo lander underwater, like floating past. It's so freaking weird. So it made me think of. All right, wait. What are we doing this time?
Slancha.
Oh, that's a good one.
Slancha.
It's Irish. It did not sound Irish.
Hardly knew her.
No, that didn't even make sense at all, Dennis.
Oh,
I thought you were saying that off of Irish.
Ooh, I like that one.
Irish, I barely knew her. My dad makes that joke all the time. Not the Irish one.
And I'm not your dad.
So we're talking about brewery culture and whatnot.
Let's talk about brewery culture.
So I can mostly speak to my experience as somebody who's not in the beer industry. I'm just somebody who likes beer.
You were a common patron.
Sure, I'm a patron. So I feel like we're in the suburbs of Seattle, essentially, is where I live.
Are you in Snohomish still?
We are in a little town called Mill Creek.
Mill Creek.
Yes. So Mill Creek, near Snohomish, near Everett, north of Seattle.
Yeah.
So most places have local beers on tap.
Mm-hmm.
Any restaurant you go to will have, often they'll have Georgetown, what we tasted before.
Yeah.
Often they'll have Fremont, which we tasted before.
Are Fremont and Georgetown both in the Seattle area?
They're both made in Seattle, in the city limits.
Oh, wow.
In Seattle.
This is legit Seattle beer.
They are Seattle beers.
Cool.
So, and then you've got, so we're fortunate that we've got that with the restaurants and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's everywhere. And then we've got the breweries themselves are often set up in like an industrial area, but they have a bar where you can go in there and you can get a drink.
Yeah.
And
New York's like that.
Yeah. So we love, there in Woodinville, there's a little town called Woodinville, also a Seattle suburb. There's a great place called Triple Horn, and their beers are good.
I've heard of Triple Horn.
Have you? Triple Horn? So what I like most about this place is like all of the quality of beer, I feel like in general just has to be high for them to survive. So all of the quality of beer, it's hard to go bad.
Yeah.
Like you choose any brewery, you're probably going to get good beer.
Yeah.
So this place, Triple Horn, is a great example of a place that has a cool space. They've got picnic tables. Sometimes they have food trucks there, and you can go grab a beer and then head home. You can come in with a group, hang out at the picnic tables, you can play games. People bring their dogs. It's this whole thing. It's just this chill environment.
Is that dog thing a very common thing?
I think that's a Pacific Northwest thing.
No, because I've noticed it's kind of a thing here too. Yeah,
it's exported here too.
It's like a dog beer thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just this cool. That's my favorite part of it. Yeah. And we don't go to these places enough because they're all kids friendly.
Yeah,
you bring your kids, you play some games, throw them some juice boxes or whatever while you enjoy a pint.
Well, you enjoy your own juice box.
Right, exactly. And it's often big and open and social, and that's the best part of it.
So what do you feel like is like your favorite brewery in the Seattle area, the Seattle metro area to go to with like the kids and everything?
I've got two in mind. So I mentioned Triple Horn because that's close to us. And then on Capitol Hill in Seattle. So Capitol Hill is a neighborhood in Seattle. We talked about it a little bit. That's where the Red Hook Brew Lab is.
Oh, Brew Lab, yeah.
There's another place called Optimism.
Optimism, that's a fun name.
Great. And they're a great brewery. They have a lot of good beers. And they've just got this really cool space on Capitol Hill where you can go and hang out. And the kids enjoy kind of running around a little bit. They've got a little outside area. And then... it's just, I like how informal it is, but it's a nice meeting space where you can meet with your friends. You can maybe grab a beer before you go to a restaurant or something for dinner.
So I think I think we've moved in that direction here in Florida.
I'm not surprised.
Also. And, we go to North Carolina quite a bit, me and Alexis, and, with the kids, and you kind of get that sort of feel too. And I feel like the craft beer world has brought... One of the biggest things that they've brought to the table that I think is fantastic is they've separated alcohol from like, I don't know. They've made it where it's not this like adult only culture. Obviously kids don't drink beer or any of that kind of stuff. But I think it used to be where, the man has a tough day at work and the wife is at home with the kids and he goes to the pub to have a pint. And it was like this thing where like, it was, I'm going drinking. And now it's sort of like, beer doesn't have to be this thing where you're like getting drunk. It's something that you go out to enjoy. You can literally have your kids with you when you go to most breweries and have a good time and there's games and it's fun.
We're in 2023. It's kind of a weird time in our history, right? Like we've just come out of this crazy shift in a lot of our lives with the pandemic. And so everybody has their places, right? You've got home, you've got work, and then is there a third place? And a lot of people, I think, don't have that anymore. The third place being like a common place like that people gather.
Yeah.
You're either at work or you're at home, and what else are you doing?
Yeah, be it church or the pub or whatever.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times these breweries try and fill that third place role.
Yeah, and
I think they do it well.
They do a good job. I agree. That's a great point, because before it was like maybe the only other place you go to is you go to a restaurant, and it's usually just your family.
Sure.
You're not interacting with the other people. It's fun to go out and sort of mingle. I mean, we have work events all the time,
right?
And they're basically always at a brewery, almost every single one.
It's because it's open and you can grab a drink and you go here and there, and they've got.
It's a nice place to hang out.
That's exactly what it is, right? It's a place to hang out,
and I think
a restaurant's a place to eat.
Yes,
it's not really a place to eat.
That is the only place. Yeah, the only purpose of it. So, and I think, if you actually, I think we're actually getting back to something that historically was always true, but hadn't been for a while. I think about Prohibition. One of the things I read a little bit about was the women's temperance movement was pretty big in Washington and Oregon. And they like pushed back hardcore, close to Prohibition. And obviously Prohibition happened. But I think at that time period in U.S. history, alcohol was really separated into this thing where it's like, I'm doing this because I'm miserable or because I want to get drunk or because I want to forget about my problems or whatever. And it really was like a toxic thing for a lot of people. And temperance was sort of like this extreme pushback in the opposite direction.
A huge shift.
Yeah. And I almost feel like a lot of those people who were big into the temperance movement, if they could see what things are like today, surely not all of them, but I think a good deal of them would be like, well, this isn't toxic like it was. This is like people just having one drink, 2 drinks, hanging out with people, enjoying, it was a good thing. It is a good thing, I should say. And, I don't think it necessarily was. But, if you go back in history, alcohol was more of just like a drink. It was nutrition.
Well, a lot of times it was a lot less heavy than these. I'm not sure how much
that is true.
Alcohol is in the 2 IPAs we brought, I think, are pretty big.
But, like during... during the Roman Empire or the Egyptians, I mean, they didn't really have ancient Egyptians, I should say. They didn't have Uber, or I mean, it's different now where you can safely navigate without endangering yourself or others.
I'm gonna order my Uber donkey cart. Take me home.
All right, let's move on to our final segment. I would like to do this quiz.
And I need to tell my airplane story, my stupid airplane story.
Oh, you were supposed to tell that at the beginning.
Was that the beginning?
Let's do that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, this is pretty funny. So Clint came from Seattle. He came how many days ago? A few days ago.
Last Tuesday, which it's Sunday now, so that's 5 days ago.
And he had a very interesting experience.
So, we're flying from Seattle, and it's my whole family, me and the kids, and my wife Shannon, and we decided we were going to do this beer podcast. So I grabbed the 3 beers that we've tried already. And then I also went to our local place. This is kind of another culture thing that I didn't mention before, but we have growler fill stations. Growler fill like a convenience store that fills growlers.
We do not have that. You can get growlers at a brewery.
So we've got growlers, and then they also offer this product called a crowler.
We do have crowlers.
So crowler,
but again, only at breweries and only certain ones.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody who doesn't know about a crowler, it's essentially I think a 32-ounce can that they cap at where you're buying it.
It's a cool product.
So the beers I brought, the Rainier is kind of a historical artifact that's still produced today. The other 2 are modern beers that are pretty common style-wise for what we have. I wanted to bring some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So I got a crowler of Fruit Punch Sour, and I got a crowler of an Imperial Stout from Fremont again.
I would have wanted both of those.
So we pack them.
Story.
We pack them in our luggage, just like we figure it would be good. So we're at home. We get everything packed, and we're gonna go to bed. And in the morning, we got to get up early for the flight. So it turns out our bag was almost overweight. We weighed it, and it's like, we got a little more stuff to go in there. So, okay, let's break it out into another bag. And we open it up. It's all wet inside. And
like you guys did that. Oh, my gosh.
So my son has a white shirt that we packed. It's red.
Oh, this was the fruit punch one?
It's the fruit punch one.
Oh, my God. That's
So I managed to save about 10 ounces of the fruit punch one into a cup. I drank it. It was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
So we had to get everything into the washer. And so we're washing stuff.
Dude, if you had went to the airport,
it's 9 p.m. We're getting up at 3 a.m. to go to the airport. It's 6 hours until we leave.
That's horrible.
So we're washing everything, and we had pulled everything out. Like the beer we put on the counter. So we decided we're going to sit while the washer's going before we put it in the dryer. We're sitting there. We're going to watch some TV, just chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're like 10 minutes into Avatar because we haven't seen the new one.
It was
and
like
we want to watch the old
long.
one. We're like 10 minutes in, and we hear this. and then
it's not a sound you want to hear.
And we run upstairs, and there's beer pouring off of our counter onto our floor because the Imperial Stout has blown.
How? I'm very confused.
I think the place. I think the place we
happen.
got the crowler. I don't think that they
did it properly.
I think it wasn't properly sealed.
Yeah, because I mean, in reality, it should be like a can. I've brought so much alcohol in luggage so many times, and I've never had a can explode. Yeah.
So I thought, okay, we've gone through all of the problems we're gonna have with our flight.
Yeah,
we're all set.
It's all downhill from here.
And then we were canceled and delayed for 36 more hours. We finally arrived.
Long story short, 36 hours of wasted time.
And I'm ready for your quiz.
No,
heck of a story, right?
Just to make it a happy ending, after you got here, everything's been fine, right?
Everything's been great. It's been a great trip. And the commercially canned beers have all survived, and we're drinking them now. It's fantastic.
Thank goodness. Oh, my gosh. Dude, if these exploded too on the flight, like, God does not want you here.
No, I'm not allowed on the Beer History Podcast.
Never again. All right. Pacific Northwest Washington beer quiz.
I'm worried about this.
You ready?
I have tons of anxiety now.
Now, for me, you don't have to get everyone right, but you need to get at least, I feel like you need to get at least 4 of them right. 3 of them is a C. We'll say 3 is a C, 4 is a B,
okay.
5 is an A.
Let's see what you got.
Okay. First one, I think is pretty easy. I think you'll get the first one. What is the oldest still operating brewery in Washington State?
It's Red Hook, right?
It is Red Hook. You were correct.
Yes.
Ding, ding. I did this last time. I said ding, ding. And when we did the editing, we wanted to add a real ding, ding. So I'm going to try not to do the dings.
I'll do the ding for the next one.
I'm not going to do it.
Can you get the answers wrong just so he doesn't do the ding, ding? He'll do that.
All right. 1 out of 1. Question number 2.
Yes.
Okay, now this is as of 2020, because data isn't always up to date. As of 2020, what is the largest volume craft brewery? So Red Hook does not count, although I don't think Red Hook's volume is what it used to be. Largest craft brewery by volume in the state of Washington.
I'm going to go with Elysian. Am I wrong?
I'm afraid you are wrong.
Oh, no.
You're actually double wrong. Elysian actually by volume was number 2. And they're not even officially a craft brewery anymore by definition. Although if we use my definition, they are.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was
so
the
we
answer?
would count it. It's Georgetown.
Really?
Now what's crazy
I didn't know that they actually produced that much beer.
My first source that I used was 2018, and it was Elysian. Between 2018 and 2020, Georgetown exploded. Yeah. So Georgetown was 97,000 barrels in 2020, and I think number 2 was Elysian. And
I'm really disappointed.
They were like 40 something thousand. I mean, Georgetown is the highest by like double.
Wow,
basically. Yeah,
I had no idea that they made that much. So it actually makes a lot of sense. Bodhizafa, and a couple other beers you can buy at Costco.
Really? Yeah, because they're so big.
Costco buys local stuff, which I think is really cool.
That is cool. Yeah, that is really cool.
Love Georgetown.
So
I'm sad.
1 out of 2. So Ooh. B is the best you can get.
Now, yeah.
Number 3. Okay. What? Now this is a little tough, but you get a little bit of wiggle room here.
Okay.
The top 5 hops varieties grown in Washington. You only need to get 3 out of 5 to get the answer correct.
Cascade, Centennial.
Mm-hmm. Cascade is 1. Centennial is not. Which sucks because I love Centennial.
Oh, I'm bad at this. I'm like, Willamette?
Nope. You're going to be so mad because they're really, I'm with you. It's like hard being on the spot.
Yeah, go ahead. I just wasn't thinking about hops.
You're going to be so annoyed, okay?
Yeah, I probably am. At least I got Cascade.
You did. You got one of them. Okay.
Not Centennial. I'm shocked.
Okay. Centennial's on the list, obviously. Not top 5. Mm-hmm. Citra.
Okay. Yeah. Should have got that.
Columbus. Mosaic. Cascade. And Simcoe. Those are the top 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have gotten Simcoe and bummer.
So number 4 is, out of those 5, which is the number 1?
I would say Cascade.
So
am I wrong?
I thought Cascade also. It turns out Citra, and not just by a small margin, by a massive, like Citra. And what's really cool is I looked at different data from different years, and it was Cascade for a long time.
I feel like if I was a brewer, I would do better on this.
Probably, yeah. I hope so. Good. Citra is huge right now. It's huge. Okay, all right. Last question. What, according to, I feel like you're sweating at this point. What brewery, according to Untapped data, is the number 1 rated brewery in Washington? I'll give you a hint. It is a brewery that we have mentioned during today's episode.
We haven't talked about Reuben's Brew. So
wait a minute.
That's surprising.
No, it's not.
We haven't talked about it.
No, it's not. It's not one that we talked about.
I would say Reuben's Brew.
You're incorrect.
Okay.
It is a brewery called Floodland Brewery. Do you know Floodland?
No.
Really? Yeah, they have the highest rating by a good amount, 4.38. You should probably check them out.
I guess so. I thought it would be Reuben's.
It was funny because the reason I said we have talked about it is because the F in Fremont. No.
Yeah, it seems like Georgetown and Reuben's are often
Reuben's really good?
talked in. Yeah.
Really
good.
Is that a Seattle one?
Yep.
Well,
I believe, in Ballard, which is a really cool little.
I've read a little bit about Ballard too. Yeah. So 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5.
That's a D. We'll give you a D.
Okay. So all of the information I've given in this episode should be taken with a big fat grain of salt. Thanks for that, David.
The whole purpose of that last segment was to completely demoralize you.
How legit is Clint? Survey says not legit.
That was really funny. Well,
play us out, David.
I'd like to thank our absolutely horrible guest, Clint Tremper, for spewing out misinformation for an hour and making us all look terrible. Clint, it has been super fun.
This has been so fun.
I really enjoyed having you here.
It was great.
My quiz was, I'm sure, not a great representation.
I hate your quiz so much.
My quiz maybe was not perfect, but I'm so glad that it made you look terrible. It really made the episode so much better for me.
This is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm really glad that we were able to do this. Pacific Northwest, if you have not been there, you should go to
Come see me.
Yeah, you can see
Let's
Clint.
hang out.
Look at the tears under his eyes.
I'm laughing so hard.
Please check us out. You can go to the beerhistorypodcast.com and see all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord. We have a fun community on Discord. And Clint, this has been great.
It has.
I'm so glad you came and visited.
Yeah, thanks.
It's been a lot of fun. See you guys later.
Bye.
And pretend that I have a cool closeout catchphrase that I don't actually have. See you next time.
Smooth.
Bandstand, one sound, no other choice. They want to limit when you hear the one voice. Just a general principle, here's how it runs. 4 channel, 3 channel, 2 down the way. When something is over, you monetize the culture. Tell me who the bodies are and who the surfing vulture. Bandstand, one sound, no other way. They wanna take what you feel and make it fade. Bandstand, one sound, no other choice. They wanna limit what you hear to one voice. Kick the bandstand down. 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 Bandstand, one sound, no other way. They wanna take what you feel and make it fade. Bandstand, one sound, no other choice. They wanna limit what you hear to one voice.
Podcast.com.
If it wasn't for beer, you wouldn't be here.
No, that's Joe Yarbrough's closing phrase.